Alright, so here we have my Uricotis floridana container, which is a 16-quart sterilite bin with 2 aeration holes in the back and 3 in the front to keep a good humidity gradient. And this will be an example of a larger container in which the springtail setup is the effective way of keeping things clean. So, if you look down in there, there's not quite a... Oh, yeah, there's quite a few over by that one's head. Get out of the way, girl. There you go. Spooked them. But as you can see, there's quite a few springtails swarming down there. And here it's really a balance of keeping things humid enough for the springtails to live, but not so humid that you interrupt any of the cockroach's normal husbandry needs. For example, I've recently learned that a lot of Uricotis, especially these guys in the Opica, like things a little drier. So it's a matter of keeping good enough wet areas to allow springtails to breed, and then subsequently crawl into smaller area or drier areas to feed, and keeping things dry enough for your roaches not to get unhappy. Let's put it that way. So here's a little bit better view. You can see a whole bunch of them crawling under there, and they really seem to like bark. And as I stated before, I don't really know where these guys came from, the springtails. They just sort of popped up in my colony one day. But they may very well be a species that specializes in eating wood, or at least eats wood in the wild. So you can see there's a whole bunch of them crawling around here. And they are just great at feeding on any roach waste that the roaches themselves don't use, like the frass especially. So I can work in these containers all day and not get a stuffy nose or start sneezing or anything else like that. And that's because instead of harmful fungi growing in the containers, I use the springtails, and those limit the growth of the fungi, which in turn means that I don't start sneezing or sniffling or getting all watery-eyed and stuff. Now there are a few other unintended decomposers in here. As you can see, just there we go. That is a fungus gnat, and if you're keeping roaches, it's a good idea to get used to having a few of those around, because once they're around, there's really not many ways you can get rid of them. You can try fly sticky tape, or believe it's vinegar, or maybe some sort of apple cider vinegar and water mixed together, and leave that out, and it'll trap some of them, but you'll never get them all. So, but normally they aren't too much of a nuisance. I'll see a few flying by the windows occasionally, but other than that, their larvae feed and break down any of the little soil material that I have here. I use a good mix of dead dried oak leaves, cypress mulch, coconut fiber, some thicker coconut fiber chunks, and some sphagnum moss. And the fungus gnat larvae will feed on, I would presume, the cypress mulch and the oak leaves. So not much you can do about it, but they don't really bother me. If they bother you, you can always make your enclosure a little bit drier. But then again, if you're using springtails, it's really a balancing act then. But oh, look at these guys just going to town. So that's the springtail method in a slightly larger container. In the two other large containers that I have of pet-like roaches, I don't particularly use any springtails or anything because they don't really seem to need it. I've never had any allergy issues or anything working with them. So I haven't really introduced anything in there, but they seem to do just fine, and not really a problem with dead roaches either, as they will both eat the dead roaches. Both species aren't too picky about what they eat. So that is a slightly larger container, and we will move on to other cleanup insects. Alright, I know I just said we move on to other cleanup insects, but I can't really think of any that I have on hand particularly, except for lesser mealworm beetles, but I'm not really using those in too many colonies at the moment. So, but I just thought I'd add this container, or this species, to the list. These are Aranavega tonkawa, and these I have to keep pretty dry because they're a desert species, or at least scrub species. So they don't really like too much moisture. You can see that's kind of a dry coconut fiber vermiculite mix there. So there, I don't really have any introduced, at least not purposefully, cleanup insects, or, well, springtails aren't technically insects, but any cleanup invertebrates in here. Though there is a small species of mite that likes to eat the dead bodies, or at least swarm the dead roach bodies in here. So those don't seem to cause any harm when they aren't swarming dead roaches, but there are a few crawling around there other than the little babies. Can't really see them, but this just shows you that you can keep a container fairly dry and not have any issues. It just all depends on the little ecosystem that you have established in there. So I can take a nice whiff of this. And no problems. In fact, let's move on to a container that's actually quite pleasant to smell. So here we have the very rare and very beautiful Gyna cappuccina. And a lot of the Gyna species have very interesting smelling enclosures. I think Oren mentioned this before. They have sort of a sweet honey-like odor. And if you don't have that odor in your Gyna containers, you might want to check into your husbandry. But it's kind of uplifting almost. And I know it's kind of weird to be sniffing roach containers, but it does have a nice smell. So more so with the Gyna, I would imagine that new species, Gyna has a similar smell. But so this is also a good image of my setup for these guys. Just some coarse coconut fiber chunks and some egg cartons. But notice that there is a substrate, and it is moderately humid in here, although there are two air holes. This is just another one of my hexagonal setups. So I hope you've enjoyed this little video. Hopefully learned a few things about good roach housekeeping. Definitely important to have cleanup insects or cleanup invertebrates in there to take care of any additional debris that would otherwise be taken care of in the wild, but not necessarily in our captive conditions. And I will try to update the YouTube channel a little more often now. Been really busy, as you can see, with all the roaches. So that's it for now, and until next time, happy roaching, everyone.